another episode of our expert series here at Women's Wellness That Works. I'm Essential Ann, and I am ecstatic and thrilled. First of all, Happy New Year, happy 2023 to everyone. And again, we are sharing information on women's health and wellness and sharing her story. So I'm thrilled because I have a very, very special guest with me today. And we go way back, almost 10 years now. Her name is Melanie Richards. Melanie, welcome, welcome, welcome to Women's Wellness That Works in our expert series. You are our yoga for anxiety expert. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. So I used to live in Montreal 10 years ago, and I, of course, moving to a different country, didn't know the language. It was very challenging. And I found my sanctuary, believe it or not, near my home in Westmount, beautiful area. And right across from that, I found a yoga studio named HappyTree, and it was the perfect name. And I went up there, and Melanie that was there, she was the owner of HappyTree and her team, and they just welcomed me with open arms. And I just found my solace, my sanctuary there during the time I was there. And it was just so wonderful to have a place of my home to feel safe. So Melanie, I want to thank you for just giving me that space.
Oh my gosh, I'm so touched, Anne. And you know, it's been 10 years. It went by like this because your energy, I remember when you would walk in with that big smile and always so caring and, you know, asking everyone how they're doing. And, you know, I remember you so vividly, and you really stood out to me. And I'm so touched and glad that we've kept in touch all these years.
Oh, you were definitely, and the reason why I have you is because you made such an impact in my life at the time. Like I said, it was a very challenging time, and I was ready for an adventure. I was ready to move to Montreal, and I loved every minute of it. And it was just a time for me to explore and really take a break from my yoga practice, because I had been teaching for 15 years, 25 classes a week, and you understand, yeah, it was 5 classes a day. I right before I moved to Montreal. So you were my solace. I needed a break. You understand burnout, and we're going to talk about that as well, right? Yeah. So why don't you share with our audience, you know, how you got started into your yoga practice? Why did you start your HappyTree business? How did that come about?
Well, like a lot of people can probably relate, in my early 20s, at that time, I actually wanted to go into acting. I'd studied television production, and I got an agent, and my agent said to me that if I wanted to be a leading lady in any role, then I didn't have the right look. I needed to be thinner, right? Mm-hmm. I was already, you know, doing yoga. Sorry, I wasn't doing yoga yet, but I was working out. And I had seen Gwyneth Paltrow and Madonna and like different celebrities trying yoga. And I saw that they had this lean, lithe body type, which was very in at that time, about 20 years ago, unfortunately, still quite in to this day. And so instead of questioning you know, society and the film industry's beauty standards, I wanted to conform to them. And so I wanted to start yoga to lose weight. I wanted to change my body somehow and make it fit into that very narrow mold. Right. And so I started Bikram yoga. I started hot yoga because I figured that would give me a good sweat and help me with my goals. And funnily enough, through the yoga, little by little, I got in touch with something in me, like this intrinsic sense of self-esteem and confidence that was so powerful that actually I quit acting.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I quit, and I stopped caring as much about conforming to those standards. But I realized that a lot of the reasons that I wanted to be an actress at that time were about proving myself, and it maybe wasn't coming from like a pure artistic place anyway. And so as I went on the yoga path and learned more and more about it through the practice and also the philosophy, I just the sense of self that I got from it, and the sense of peace and well-being and calm that was completely intrinsic, meaning that nothing in my external world could affect my peace. Now that is
So it is powerful.
so powerful that I thought, well, this needs to be my life now. Like I need to share this with everybody. So I quit. I was working as a bartender. I was, had my agent and stuff. I quit everything, moved to my home, did a teacher training, and, met my business partner and opened up HappyTree within a year. It happened.
So were you in Montreal already, or because I know you said you were from Ottawa?
Yeah, so I moved to Montreal for university, started yoga in Montreal, the acting and the television production and everything in Montreal, and then went back to Ottawa to do my teacher training. And then, sorry, did I say went back to Ottawa to do teacher training, and then came back to Montreal to open my yoga studio.
Right. Okay. So yoga allowed you to feel confident about yourself, and your value, your self-worth and value obviously increased during that time. So therefore you didn't need to be an actress. You didn't need that validation to be, am I good enough? Right. So that really impacted you and made a difference. Then you opened up your amazing HappyTree studio. So how long did you have your studio for, and what type of people, how did you get the word out that you were opening up your studio? Because there were so many, when I was there, I mean, you had so many students, every class was full. I just remember every class was full.
Well, it was all about outreach at that time. And, I was one of maybe a dozen yoga studios in Montreal, or maybe even less. At that time, we were still early adopters. I'd started my studio in 2007. And since then, a lot more studios had opened up. But yeah, Lululemon was a great support. I was an ambassador for them. I got out and, did yoga anywhere and everywhere. We had booths in festivals and malls, and just, I think the vibe of the studio attracted people who then referred their friends, and that's the best, right?
Exactly.
When a lot of people from the neighborhood too, that were looking like you were looking for a studio.
Yes, and I don't know if most people know Lululemon originated in Canada. Isn't that correct? It is a Canadian company.
Yeah.
Although it is international now, but we have, obviously Lululemon here in the United States is huge. But yes, it originated. And in fact, I think I went to one of the first, isn't it one of the first Lululemon stores wasn't it in Westmount? There was one in the corner that
in
Montreal. Yeah.
There was one downtown on St. Catherine, and then one in Westmount. And so it was the Westmount one that really gave us a lot of support, and just like wonderful people who would, again, just tell their friends. And we had, we were across the street from a big CEGEP, like a big school and a mall and stuff. So there were a lot of people in the area that appreciated having us there, for sure.
And then how did you seek your yoga instructors? Was there a criteria that you had? Did you know of yoga teachers? And of course you were doing your yoga teacher training. So maybe you had, had those instructors come and join you?
Yeah, again, eventually I started training my own teachers, but in the beginning, it was really about finding people that matched with the energy of my studio. And something that was always really, really important to me is that my studio was a place that felt welcoming, accessible, authentic, joyful, so I tended to gravitate towards teachers that had, big smiles, warm energy. And so it mattered less, how many, let's say, years experience they had, and more about what the terms of their energy. And I think you remember some of my teachers.
I do. I remember Brian. I remember, I forget the other woman's name, but she was also, yes. And then the name HappyTree, how did that originate? Because it's such a beautiful name. I mean, that's really what drew me, was tree pose. And then, so how did you come about with that name?
This is a good story. I haven't told it in a long time, which is that I used to work, as I was saying, as a bartender in a fine dining restaurant. And when I was doing my yoga teacher training in Ottawa, my boyfriend still worked at the restaurant in Montreal. And I had to do some outside teaching hours where I would, teach, friends and family, and they would evaluate me. So I asked the staff, my boyfriend and the staff from the kitchen and the serving staff, to please do a yoga class with me and fill out the evaluation form. So they all just stumbled out of bed for this 2 p.m. Saturday class, hungover. Many of them, I think all of them had never done yoga before. My boyfriend was at the time like, hey, get out of bed, come to Mel's class, right? And so they're there and they're just like, okay, we're doing this out of our love and appreciation for you, Melanie, but don't expect us to like it. Don't expect us to ever come back. Lead them through this class. And when we get to tree pose, which is the pose where you're standing on one leg, the other leg out to the side, arms up, I say to them, now lift the corners of your mouth up and smile. And now you're in happy tree. And they all just cracked up because they're hungover, they're like, they thought it was hilarious. So they started, like, during service or just before service would start, they would catch each other's eye and go, happy tree. And funny enough, to just wrap it up, is that they ended up loving yoga so much that I started coming every Saturday to teach them a class.
There you go. That's perfect. Didn't you do a happy tree photo? I think there was one photo that was a happy tree photo, right?
Definitely.
With all of you.
Logo too. If people see the logo, it's actually this little bonhomme with his head kind of turned up to the sun, heart open, in tree pose, and so it's in our logo as well. And so that's the feeling that I wanted to sort of convey to people, that sort of joyful, open, down to earth, accessible kind of yoga. Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, the yoga studio is no longer in existence.
The studio itself, so I had the physical location for 10 years, and then due to all kinds of circumstances, we closed that location, and I continued classes and teacher trainings out of another location. And then with the pandemic, that location actually went out of business. There's been a lot of there's been a big jigsaw. I'm sure it's been like that all over the world.
For everyone all over the world.
Other ones opening, but it's not the same model anymore. So HappyTree still exists.
Yes.
Live and well, but in terms of online classes in my home studio, teacher trainings that I give in person as well, but out of other spaces.
So let's talk about your Instagram post, because really I reconnected with you because I saw that you created a Yoga for Anxiety Instagram page, and I just started looking. I'm like, that's Melody. I'm like, oh my God. So when I saw that, I'm like, this is amazing. I have to call you. I have to reconnect with you. What's this about? So I know a couple of your posts have gone viral, right? With Yoga for Anxiety. And let's talk about that, because really there's a reason you created that. So what can you share with our viewers and with the women out there? Why did you start Yoga for Anxiety? Because I think it's a great niche. I think it's definitely needed right now. So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, in a way, I couldn't believe that it wasn't already being done in the specific way that I had in my mind. And the idea really came to me during a yoga practice. It was sort of a download. But it had been in the back of my mind for years and years, because I had my own have my own struggle with anxiety, for my whole life, really. And one of the reasons that yoga was so powerful for me was because that sense of confidence that I talked about when I said why I started teaching and all that. It was one of the first things that really gave me a sense of peace that helped to calm my anxiety and reduce the anxiety. Now, since then, I've done other things too, therapy and mentoring and coaching and all kinds of things. But yoga was really the first and most lasting way that I found to manage my anxiety, or manage anxiety as it comes up, and meditation and mindfulness as well. Huge. I did 5 of the 10-day silent meditation retreats, Vipassana retreats. And that really transformed my relationship with anxiety and helped me to understand it differently. And so because I have the acting and the television background, and I'm generally an entrepreneur and love being creative, when Reels came out, I thought, okay, I could really get into this. And then, as you know, circumstances in my life changed just over a year ago. My sister passed away, she died, and she was really my best friend. And it destroyed me. It completely destroyed me, and I had to build myself back up. And so, when I started the yoga for anxiety, it was, coming up to the year anniversary of my sister's death. And I thought, if I'm going to get back into work and back into the public eye with my teaching, because I had taken a break to grieve. So I thought, if I'm going to get back in, it needs to be something that really matters to me. It has to be something that is of service to people. And it just was a way of bringing together my creativity, my background, my yoga teaching knowledge and education, as well as my desire, my really deep, profound desire to be of service to people who are going through similar things.
That is amazing. That truly, I believe that this is yoga for anxiety is you're at the right time in the right place. Because, with the pandemic and with everyone increasing in anxiety, unfortunately, suicide rates have increased as well. This is a time for people to seek out other healthier ways to manage their anxiety. So what are some of the ways in yoga that you do? What are 3 to 5 things, maybe 3 things that you do for mindfulness for anxiety? What are some of those triggers too for you for anxiety? I mean, because there is trauma. I think it's called trauma yoga. Here in the US, they do have training for trauma yoga, but I think that is such a general there's so many different varies of trauma, but this we're dealing with specifically for anxiety. I mean, there's obviously depression, anxiety, panic attack, all these other conditions, but anxiety is very, very specific. So what are 3 things that you can share with us as far as mindfulness for anxiety?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you said, what are the triggers of anxiety and how does mindfulness help? Because actually anxiety on some level is the same for everyone. It gets triggered through our senses. So we might hear an aggravating sound that kind of triggers a feeling of anxiety, and that will lead to a thought or an emotion. It could be that we see, we're scrolling and we see something go by on our social media or the news that triggers anxiety. When we say trigger, it's like, it's not just triggering it's not just the current, and maybe you can edit this. I don't know how to say it. So when we're talking about those triggers of something that you see, that you feel, it could be that you have a sensation of hunger or fatigue that brings on the anxiety, and all these things. Sometimes it is just what's happening in the present moment. Sometimes it's adding a log to the fire of our anxiety from, past traumas and things. And it's just like aggravating those triggers. Or maybe that's not the best way to put it. I'm going to say it again in a way that you'll be able to cut if you want to cut this part out.
Sure.
So the way that anxiety gets triggered is through our senses. So whether we see something or hear something, or maybe we have a sensation like hunger or fatigue that triggers us, at the end of the day, whether it's a physical sensation that it starts with, or whether it's a thought, because thoughts can trigger anxiety as well. At the end of the day, the anxiety itself is a physical sensation in the body. So if you really tune in when you feel anxious, you might notice that it's a tightening up, it's a constriction. You teach about essential breath. So the breath gets constricted. We tend to breathe very high up in the chest, here hollow, shallow breathing, not in the stomach, a tightening of the throat, of the chest. And generally speaking, that sensation is very unpleasant because it's part of our survival mechanism, and it's telling us something needs your attention, something is off balance, right? So what mindfulness does is it gives us the opportunity to first notice and become aware. So awareness is part of mindfulness. Oh, I'm aware that the sensation of anxiety is present in my body. And then you can look at what triggered it. Was it something I saw, tasted, smelled, touched, go through the senses? Was it something I was thinking about? Was it a conversation that triggered it? You can kind of gauge from there and see, okay, and examine with curiosity, and very important, without judgment. So you're not judging, you're just kind of with a mild curiosity, seeing where that trigger might have come from to see, is it something that needs my immediate attention? Like my house is on fire.
Right, exactly.
Or is it maybe something from my past that got triggered in a conversation? I had a feeling of rejection, whether true or not, that reminded me of a trauma from childhood where I was rejected, or, so then you can see, is my nervous system reacting normally, or is it to like a real stress, or is it overreacting according to what my past might be bringing up, according to how the past might be brought into the present moment.
Into the present, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting that you said the 5 senses, right? So obviously if we see something, smell something, hear something, touch something, and then what's the other one? Hear, smell, touch, taste. Taste would
like
be
you could have like a taste of something that brings you back to childhood, or or like a gross taste in your mouth that you've had, like who knows, but
or even a smell of something that could have triggered something that you remember that was traumatic, or
Yeah.
I know for me, one of my anxieties is being in a hospital, just because I'd been in and out of hospitals, but being in a hospital or seeing a hospital I remember the very first time, it was just like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. I can't be in here. I have to leave, because it was just bringing back all these memories of me being in the hospital. But yes, that, and so yoga for anxiety allows you to help yourself, and then you are sharing your exercises and poses, and a lot of them are very simple. Right? They're not, you're not doing headstands or
and that
sun salutations.
Step. It's like, okay, even if you don't figure out what the trigger was, or even if you do examine what it is and you're not sure, like in that moment of awareness, when you're not judging and you're not fueling the fire of anxiety in that little space, you can choose how you respond. So a lot of the things that we do can aggravate the anxiety. When we feel anxious and we kind of identify with it right away and believe in it so much that we're like, oh, it must be validated, and so I must have more anxious thinking, or we assume like a very tense position, which then sends a feedback loop into the mind of more anxiety. So what the yoga does is it creates a little interception in that mind-body relationship, mind-body-breath relationship, where
Absolutely.
if I can learn in that moment of awareness to respond with a deep breath, to respond with something that will help me release tension from my jaw, my shoulders, my neck, something that will help me stretch out so I'm not holding the physical tension of being in my body. I'm giving it a way to release. Then my whole baseline stress levels reduce, and I'm in a much better position to then deal with whatever is causing the anxiety, because I'm calm, I have perspective, I can be a lot more creative or rational depending on what the situation requires.
And again, the exercises that you do on your Instagram posts are very simple. I think most people can do them, right? So they can like either some of them are like on a chair, or using a chair, or you're lying down or doing some certain poses. Even your cat has joined you for some of them, which is so sweet. So really, it's just part of your everyday life that you're doing this
That's what I want. I want things that people can just take a break when they're at their desk if they're working from home. So there's things that, you can do with your chair. You're wearing your jeans, you're wearing your shoes. It doesn't matter. There's something that breathing exercises that you can do when you're like about to come into a stressful situation, or you're, let's say, stuck in traffic or something. What's like a breathing exercise that you can do that will help calm you in that moment? So it's really important to me that it's accessible to everyone, because, it's people that have anxiety are everywhere.
Everywhere.
And
Any place, any place, anywhere, anytime they're having, you're having an anxiety or a panic attack, right?
yeah.
So, yes.
So it shouldn't matter, what your body looks like, or where, your level of expertise. It's like, I just want something that to share the things that people can use in the moment to help with those triggers.
And again, this had started because you had gone through your grieving process and ongoing. And so this definitely helped you through that difficult, challenging time, which, many people can relate to.
Yeah, something positive to focus on. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying it gave me something. So it gave me something to focus on that was positive. And that I felt could actually be of service. So in that way, it has helped with the grieving process. So
in a sense, you are continuing HappyTree because now you're doing it online. And so this is a continuation because, we can transform, your practices into digital and online, which is wonderful because now it's accessible to the whole world.
That's
not
right.
Just everyone in Montreal, because I'm like, oh, I miss my classes at HappyTree. I can't go there, but now I can see you on Instagram anytime I need to or want to. So that's what's great.
Yeah, and the Instagram page it's also like a window into, if you want more. I do offer yoga for anxiety classes online. In the new year, I'll have more offerings around that. But again, I just want it to be these accessible tools for people to be able to use in their day-to-day life without necessarily having like a big formal yoga practice, but just the things that will help to regulate their nervous system and maybe have a different relationship to the anxiety and understand the anxiety in a different way and have more compassion towards themselves.
Exactly. Having a passion for yourself first and foremost.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a quote I posted that said, if you don't have compassion for yourself, then it is not complete. It has to be compassion for yourself first before anyone else. 100%. So I want to change the subject a little bit. And because when I first met you, you are remarkable. You're a leader in your community. You were very focused and driven, and you had this amazing studio. And then tell me about what happened. I know you mentioned about being burnt out, overwhelmed. There was a lot going on, but you had a plan. You wanted to have a child.
I did. Yeah. And I didn't see how that was going to be possible, actually, because I was burning out and I was trying to do everything, and just adding more and more to my plate. And as a small business owner, I'm sure a lot of people who are in that situation can relate that you're wearing many, many hats. And it's hard to turn off, right? Just because it's the weekend or the evening. And often I'd be teaching on the weekends and evenings and running the business during the day. So there just wasn't really room for a family. Right. So when the studio closed, there were a lot of circumstances that were out of my control in terms of, the lease being up in the building. And there was a big demolition that was about to start in the building next to the studio, which would have really disrupted the classes. But at the same time as that was happening, I thought, well, I'm 39. And if I want a chance of a family, maybe this is really a blessing. And that this closing of the physical space of my studio, which has been so wonderful for 10 years, but that if I close it, it's a big leap of faith, but perhaps I can continue my business in another way that would allow me to have a family. And so that's what happened. I started focusing more on the teacher trainings. And then, funnily enough, my daughter was born at the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh my God, really? What month was she born?
She was born in end of February. So she was born, and I think we went into lockdown 3 weeks later.
Yes, like March 17th or March 16th. And here in the US, it was about that time. So So she was only a few weeks old when the, pandemic started. Oh my goodness. So that's, the fact that you were aware of that, the fact that you said, okay, I need to pause, I need to, shift and figure out things. And I know you got pregnant at the age of 40 and you had your baby at 41. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So now tell me, because I know there are a lot of women, and I was one of them. I actually went through infertility when I was in my 20s and younger, and infertility is still a taboo for women. It's not something that we discuss. It's not something we share. It's a very, very sensitive subject. It's very difficult to even talk about sometimes with women. So having gone through that myself, and then you having had a child at a later age, were you trying for a while, or how did that occur?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I completely empathize with so many people's fertility journeys. I know I have a good friend of mine who is a fertility doula and fertility teacher, yoga teacher, and the statistics are really staggering in terms of fertility. So what was interesting in my case is that it wasn't a physical thing. I actually got pregnant
Right away.
Like literally on the first try.
That's wonderful.
Which is good news, like, that I was 40 and a half and it happened very easily. But I would say this is something that's talked about even less in a way, I think, is that I'd been wanting a child for 10 years. But I got it on the first try. But the thing that held me back wasn't the physical, it was the mental.
It was
right?
the mental.
Yes. It was that I couldn't hold a healthy relationship. I had to do a lot of work on myself. I didn't have examples of healthy relationships growing up. And, for many reasons, I just, could, as my friends were getting married, I was still trying to figure out how to even have a relationship. So, I grew a lot in that. And I really, when I met Jeff, my partner now, and Eleanor's father, I had learned a lot from my previous relationships and from my therapy and things about some of my patterns. And I was actually able to break through those patterns and, establish a very healthy, mutual, loving relationship where I then felt safe to start a family, So, so yeah, like everybody has their struggles and whether it's mental or physical or both, and a lot of the times they're related. In this case, I was very lucky physically.
And I believe in divine timing. I believe that, it wasn't time for you yet to be a mother because you were in service. You were in service to so many people in the community in Montreal. And so, I know that when I had been going to a HappyTree, I mean, it might have been different if you had been a mother. Maybe I didn't, you wouldn't have been there as much, or
something would have suffered, either my child or me, I would have suffered.
Or you might have created a yoga kids class, yoga baby class, which you have done, I think, in the past, right? At HappyTree. I mean, something would have happened, but I think divine timing and you finding and you continuing to grow, finding the right partner for you who was in alignment with your visions, your goals, your dreams, and so forth. I think definitely it was all meant to happen. And so because again, I think women feel that, oh, I need to have a child at age, 30 or 35 because my eggs are going to be, not as good as they were and so forth. What advice would you give for women? Because obviously you have been healthy for many years. You've been practicing yoga. What advice would you give for women maybe who are trying to get pregnant or would like to get pregnant? I mean, because you are one of those really statistics for women who have had a successful, healthy pregnancy the first time,
Yeah, very healthy pregnancy. And well, one is to have faith. And that to know that, people who do have trouble conceiving or have, that miscarriage is also not talked about a lot, but that it is more common than people realize, I believe. And, you know, I've heard so many stories and had so many friends who did manage to conceive after. And it's, I guess, like really the things that I did for myself to keep healthy were to manage my stress levels. I think stress does create a wear and tear on our body.
Our bodies, yeah.
And there can be a pressure there. I think when there's a lot of pressure, sometimes it's harder to conceive. But certainly, you know, the yoga, the breathing, meditation. At the time, right before getting pregnant, I was doing these longevity smoothies. Maybe I can share the recipe with you in the morning, and making sure to eat lots of greens and drink lots of water. But who knows? I mean, at the same time, it's like, maybe I would have done all of those things and it wouldn't have worked. But I also prayed. I prayed so hard, and like for this child, not, so it's hard for me to say in a way, because I'm like, I can share the things that work for me. It might not necessarily work for other people. I think generally speaking, bringing stress levels down is super important. Checking to see, like, you know, is there something medically going on? You know, don't be afraid to go and check if it's not working out. Because like I had one friend, it was like this, unlike your situation, unfortunately, where it turned out very badly for you. This friend had a little surgery and was able to conceive after that. You know, I've seen like many stories. So it's just like, yeah, like keeping the faith, and also knowing, as you know, that you can be a mother in many ways. And I had come to terms with that as well, that if I sort of missed my window, that there were other ways that I could fill my maternal instinct, whether it's to adopt, whether it was, you know, through the way that I serve people. You know, my students would always call me Mama Bear. You know, there's there's so many ways to fill that need for nurturing, that I think, like, I would have probably gone somewhere in the world and like volunteered in orphanages. Like, I don't know what I would have done, but I would have done something to create that connection.
I believe there definitely is a connection with yoga and diaphragmatic breathing. I don't think I shared this with you. I actually worked at a fertility center in Las Vegas, and I was teaching Qigong to the women who are going through in vitro fertilization and artificial insemination. And basically, I was just preparing their uterus for the baby. And so we did a lot of just diaphragmatic breathing and Qigong. I'm sure you're familiar with Qigong. It's just basically relaxing the body. It's relaxing like every joint in the body to the point where you're just, I mean, it's slow movement, right? So that basically helped women prepare for fertility and, you know, their baby coming into the world by, you know, your uterus is kind of like the castle to prepare the baby to enter into this world. And I definitely believe yoga and a lot of the yoga poses helps to allow us to release, you know, in the pelvis area and all the areas in our reproductive areas, you know, is connected. So I believe, yes, everything that you've done to allow yourself to relax and to release, because it is, the more tension we have in that area, right? There's less viability for embryo to grow and produce and so forth. So yes, I believe you definitely had that, you know, years and years of practice prior to. So that's,
yeah, I didn't know that you did that. That's really cool that you did that. And I think that brings up the point that, you know, whether it's Qigong or yoga, it's these stress reducing practices that are important. Like, find what works for you, because on a physiological level, the fight or flight response, part of it is that blood flows away from the digestive and reproductive system into the legs and into the arms, preparing us to fight or flee, right? The fight or flight response brings us into our sympathetic nervous system. And all the sympathetic nervous system response cares about is our survival. So when you're just caring about surviving, like escaping that bear, let's say that angry mama bear, you're in the forest alone, and, you know, are you going to freeze? Are you going to fight? Are you going to run? You're not going to stop and make a sandwich.
no.
You're not going to like stop and be like, oh, let's that doesn't turn you on, but like, so it's like, it's part of our survival response that it's like when we're in these states of high stress, blood is not flowing to either the digestive or the reproductive system, which is why you see so many stress related issues around digestion and reproduction, right?
Absolutely.
So that's simplistic, and it's much bigger than that. But in terms of how I understand it for in terms of learning to regulate the nervous system, whether it's for anxiety or for fertility or just stress reduction, it's all good. Like just learn to manage your breath, to release physical tension, which is why I tend to focus more on like yin yoga and restorative yoga and gentle yoga, ways that like really help to just release some of that day-to-day tension that builds up over time.
I believe that our society has been in chronic sympathetic prior to the pandemic, and more than likely why people are sick, including pre-existing conditions. But we have been in that chronic sympathetic state for such a long time. And if we continue, then yes, chronic diseases can continue. But yeah, having fertility, if you want to get pregnant, definitely being more in the parasympathetic and rest, digest, and restore is what we really need.
Because our society, as you're pointing to, it's more chronic stress than acute stress. So meeting a bear in the forest, acute stress. And so our ancestors would be faced with the stress, but then once the stress was gone, would kind of, let's say, go from red to green. Whereas because we're getting these constant little shots of cortisol and adrenaline, it's like we stay in this orange yellow zone, not quite red alert, not quite green. And we just start to believe that that orange yellow zone is normal. And
it's normal. Yeah, exactly.
These relaxation practices like Qigong and yoga and diaphragmatic breathing, and you relearn, oh my gosh, wait, this is what it's like to be relaxed, and it teaches you a new possibility or has you remember, because our natural state is relaxation. I think that's really important for women.
It is. Our natural state is relaxation. And I remember a good friend of mine said, she asked me what, I don't know, I was doing a reading with her. She's a palm reader. And she said to me, what are you doing? Why are you so busy? And I said, oh, I have this, and this. And she said, doing nothing is actually doing something. And I was like, this is a few years ago. And I'm like, doing nothing is actually doing something. So then I realized, yes, I definitely need to pause, right? So when I created the breathing affirmation calls, it's the power of the pause, or the power of stillness is the breath. And so I talk about that being in the power of the pause, and really just pausing and taking that moment to take some soft, gentle breaths through your diaphragm. But I agree. I mean, breathing has everything to do with, breathing is life. It's essential to everything that we live and do.
You have a quote like that. One of my favorite quotes by Guru Mukh is, the quality of your life is equal to the quality of your breath.
Yes. I agree
to that. Yeah.
There's another quote that I had in my affirmation: when you master your breath, you master your life. When you master your breath, you master your life. So really, it's managing the stress, the emotions, the anxiety, and then therefore your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions are in control. So you're managing your life. Really, that's really the key. But that's one of the affirmation cards, though. Definitely all the affirmations.
So cool that you did that. I love it.
I want to talk to you about, I think you shared in your Instagram post that you're really transparent about the fact that your sister passed away from an eating disorder. And I want you to share a little bit about that, what you can share. What did you learn through that process about her life and her passing? And how does that play in the dynamics of your family?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is like just the stigma around eating disorders and mental health. Like, I look at my sister, she was brilliant, empathetic, lovable, just so talented, and the best sister I could ever ask for. You know, she was a whole human being. She was not just an eating disorder. And in fact, she kept it secret for 20 years.
Wow.
Because she was ashamed. Partly, you know, it was part of the stigma, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there were other reasons, but definitely the stigma and the shame was a big reason. And you know, we had sort of confronted her at different times. Her roommates in university told me later, you know, that they had held an intervention with her. I'd confronted her. My stepmom had confronted her. She'd been seeing psychologists all the way through who, you know, didn't pick up on the signs also. Like, I think there's just so much that needs to be done still in terms of understanding eating disorders and mental illness in general. And there also needs to be a greater compassion, I think, for it, and empathy, so that people aren't so afraid to come forward. And you know, there's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of research for treatment as well. My sister was also horrified of hospitals, a bit like yourself, had some really bad experiences, you know, and so I think that contributed to it, that there was only so much help that she would accept because afraid to go to the hospital. You know, so she was being followed by, you know, an eating disorder therapist and things in the last 3 years, but it sort of coincided with the pandemic. So that really didn't help, you know, the isolation didn't help. So, you know, I just want people to get a sense of like that people are not their mental illness, that it is a disease. It's an insidious, horrible disease, whether it's, you know, an alcohol or drug addiction, or, you know, a food. In my sister's case, there was bulimia and anorexia. She had agoraphobia, which is where you're afraid to leave the house. Like, there were a lot of things going on, but
it's almost like multiple layers of different disorders and diseases.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, that's not who she was. Do you know what I mean? And so
she wasn't defined by her disease.
That's it. And I think, you know, if there was less stigma around it and people really understood that and didn't just like see you as anxiety, depression, eating disorder, then maybe people would be more willing to get the help and the support that they need and to open up to family members.
Yeah, that definitely is. That is just so difficult and challenging when we place the labels on people, especially family members, and therefore, or even ourselves, maybe we think that therefore we're not able to reach out as much as we can. And you know, I know she was your younger sister, correct? And so you were the older sister. And how, you know, your grieving process took a toll on you. And I know, because I went through a similar grieving, not with my sibling, but a nephew of mine. So during that time, then you created after a while, the Yoga for Anxiety program that you've created, and that helped you to deal with it and manage the things that come up. And you talk about therapy, you talk about going to therapy. You've been going to therapy prior to, but how has therapy helped you during that time?
Oh, I mean, it was crucial. It was actually my psychologist. I'd had her for like 8 years, and I was doing, things were coming together so nicely in my life, and I was feeling great. And so I had actually stopped, you know, which is the goal with therapy, is that one day you don't need it anymore. And so one of the first things I did after my sister died was call her up and be like, we need to start, and we need to like start now. Right. And so what she's helped me to do is do a lot of reframing, seeing how, you know, my own, you know, childhood stuff played into how, like, my interpretation of the events that happened. And you know, just like teaching me, like what we were talking about, like having compassion for myself as a sister who's lost her best friend, you know, through the situation. And I've worked with a grieving counselor as well. And I just think like grief and the trauma, like what I had was not just grief, it was traumatic grief. You know, I wasn't expecting, even though you always know it's a possibility,
But you never know.
You never
You
think.
never, yeah, you never think it's, yeah.
So, you know, like there was a time in the beginning where I could do talk therapy, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in my body. And then I was like, okay, I need to start working out. And so I was working out, and it took a long time actually before I could really get into the yoga practices, because the yoga is so powerful that it would like almost open up too much of the emotion that was in my body as tension. So I still have ways to go with that. I really believe in somatic healing. But yeah, it's progressive, you know, and I have like 2 affirmation cards for grieving that somebody had given me, like a stack of grieving affirmations. One of them was, I'm healing even if I don't feel like it. If I don't feel like I'm healing, I am. Okay. So that I had to keep faith in, because there were where it really felt like there was no progress. I was also like, I had a prayer and chanting practice that helped me grieve. And then the other one was, be the things you love the most. Be the things you love the most about the people who are gone. Be the things you love the most about the people who are gone. And I have that in my kitchen now. Like, so I see it every time I'm making my morning coffee. And that's part of like, my sister encouraged me so much to share my gifts. And she was such an empathetic person and loved being of service as well and helping people. She was a personal trainer. She had so much to give. And so in her spirit, in her honor, I also want to be able to give and be of service, you know, to honor her memory.
That
and
is
like
beautiful.
And the compassion and everything that she had for other people.
Exactly. I mean, she sounded like a amazing, beautiful woman, and
Yeah.
full of life, definitely full of life.
Very full of life.
Yeah.
And again, like that's, it's like she was very, very, very physically sick towards the end of her life, but her spirit, and I think that that's what people need to focus on, is each other's spirits, right? Like, when the spirit is unbreakable, I really believe that. And, you know, you can always see through to your own spirit and to other people's spirits and to what is the same in all of us, and the purity and the goodness of other human beings and of yourself. As you were saying, you don't want to leave yourself out of the equation of compassion. So, you know, if we can just like see each other and see ourselves in that way, and be able to treat whatever's getting in the way of that, I think that's a big step. And so, you know, we each have our thing that we offer, and there's so many tools. And again, I think the tools that I offer are there to help people get to a place in their baseline stress where they can ask for help, where they can seek help, where they can receive help. You know, so I'm not a psychologist or an eating disorder therapist or anything, but I might be able to help you get to a place where you can ask for help.
Yes.
That
Yes.
makes-
Absolutely. I believe you are a resource in so many ways, you know, because of your experience and because of your training, your yoga training, and you are a yoga teacher trainer as well. You have the experience for years now. How many years? It's been what? How many years now you've been practicing yoga and teaching?
Practicing 20 years, teaching 15 years, and teacher trainings for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, so definitely you have that training and expertise behind you to share with other people. I mean, I come to you, you know, for training, for advice, for anything that deals now with anxiety, because you have gone through this process and this journey. So I want to thank you for sharing, being vulnerable and sharing all the things that have helped you, not only with yoga for anxiety, but, you know, going through your journey with your yoga studio, and then talking about, you know, being pregnant, and then going through that. And then now you're starting this wonderful journey with yoga for anxiety online. And this is again another stepping stone into a newer, you know, another journey that you're going to open up for millions of people. So where can people find you? Where on Instagram? What's your Instagram tag?
Yeah, so it's a mental_health_yoga, mental health yoga. And you have my name there, but yeah, so that's it, sharing little practices there. And then we're just in the process of getting our website relaunched. And then there you'll see that I'll have some online yoga for anxiety. This is just the beginning. Again, I know, it's just the beginning. Inspiration, but for sure, it's nice to be able to share my story, hopefully in a way that will inspire others, that whatever challenges you come across your path, it's not the end. It's not a roadblock. Anxiety is not a roadblock. It is a signpost. It's usually pointing you to something that either needs your attention, your awareness, or needs to change. But if you trust in your guidance system, that whatever you're meeting as a challenge is only going to, and I would want my sister back for anything in the world, right? Like I don't want that she died. However, as a result of that, yes, have I gone deeper into myself? Have I learned more about myself? Do I have more to give? Probably, so just to trust that the challenges are leading you somewhere.
And that, I think, is so powerful for so many women. And, I speak to women in general because our audience is mainly women, but really anyone, because I think the foundation of every family is women. And if women can, women heal themselves, and they can heal their family and their community and then the world. So that's how powerful women get to be. I want to really thank you, merci beaucoup, for everything that you do, being in service. And I will post all the information, her website, her Instagram, and her email if you want to contact her. But definitely, she is our Yoga for Anxiety mindfulness expert on women's wellness that works. And I encourage you and invite you to follow her on Instagram, watch her videos. I mean, they are just really, just truly relaxing and just releasing, and bringing yourself back into that connection of who you really are. And that is the natural state of our healing of who we are. So I thank you so, so much. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the happy new year for you and your baby and your family. I appreciate you, but I know we will see each other soon, whether we come out back to Montreal for sure. I definitely want to see you.
You will. I hope you'll come see me. I would love to, or maybe I'll come where it's sunnier.
Or we'll switch. We'll come back and forth, but I really appreciate you for all these years that we've been friends and now reconnected, I should say. But thank you so much. Thank you to our viewers. Watch us for the next series of Women's Wellness That Works Expert Series. And remember, every woman has her story. What's your story?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you so much too. I really do. What you're doing is so important, and I'm honored to share my story with you.
I'm so honored to as well. Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.